All right, and hello to the Amina al Sarafi, The Adventures of Amina al Sarafi book review and book summary. Way more book summary than it is book review, but I've written a book review, so if you want to go read that, go read that. This book is by Shannon Chakraborty, and this is my first book ever reading by her. And let's just say that I'm impressed, and I'm definitely going to be reading the next sequel after this. Out of all the books I've read, this is probably the most fun book. Just period, pure fun. Not to say that there aren't more layers of depth to it, because there are. I talk more about that in the book review, but it's just great. But to hop right in, it starts from the perspective or the account of this dude named Jamal, and he is he's calling on Allah and the Prophet Muhammad to bless this tale as he gets ready to tell us the story of this great pirate woman that he had met named Amina al Sarafi. And then it immediately goes into Amina telling her tale. And she starts off telling this story about how she was hired by these two young kids to row them out into the middle of this ocean to do something. She thought it was one thing, but what they're really trying to do is perform a ritual to raise some kind of demon, and they succeed in doing it. This big sea foam mist demon comes on the boat and possesses one of the kids, and that kid tries to murder the other kid, and Amina has to stop it. She has a dagger that's blessed, and she uses it to stab the demon, gets rid of it. And the two kids afterwards, they are terrified of her, and they're like, yo, we know we were just trying to summon a demon and all, but you're a witch. And she's like, I don't care, bitch. Just don't tell anybody what you saw here. And they're like, we promise we won't tell anyone. Immediately, they go tell everyone, and it reaches the ears of an old lady in this town called Aden by the name of Salima. In the next chapter, Amina is at her house and she's fixing the roof with her daughter, and suddenly a palanquin, the things that carry royal people, it comes down the road and it deposits this old bejeweled lady onto her doorstep. Lady don't even talk to her. She just walks right in. She just starts talking. She's be like, hey, blah, 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 like she owns the place. And she kind of allows it because the old lady is an elder, and there's also a big concept of hospitality, especially to guests. And so she invites homegirl in. Well, homegirl invites herself in, and she's like, yo, you gonna give me a piece of water, but basically you're gonna give me some refreshments, see what I'm here about. They sit down, and this whole time Amina is trying to keep her daughter hidden, because Amina used to be a pirate, a really well-renowned pirate of the Indian Ocean. So she doesn't know why this stranger. By the way, they live out in the fucking boonies. Like this is old retired pirate trying to set her life apart from what she used to be. So she's like, who the fuck is this old lady? Why does she know who I am? And she's also trying to hide her daughter, Marjana. So one, her daughter doesn't know about that side of her life. And two, so her daughter isn't exposed to that side of her life. But old lady finds out, and then she tells Amina, she's like, I have a job for you. I've heard about you and I need your help. And Amina's like, I've retired. Like, I don't do that shit anymore. And Salima manipulates her, talking about like, oh, what if it was your daughter? Like she mentions the mother connection, and that really pulls Amina in. And essentially what she wants Amina for is, Salima tells the story that this Frankish captain came to her and he was like, I'm looking for artifacts and memorabilia that could maybe be magic in nature, and her family comes from a long line of kings and queens and royalty, so they have a lot of magical items in their possession. And so he asked for it, and Salima's like, fuck you, no. And while he is leaving, Salima says that he kidnapped her granddaughter, Dunya. And so she's like, I need you to go track Dunya down, because one, I don't really want this news getting out because of marriageability. There's just a lot of politics that goes into it, but she's asking Amina to go grab her granddaughter from this Frankish captain, and Amina is waffling on it. But you know, in truth, Amina does miss that lifestyle. So she comes around, and in coming around to it, she has a conversation with first her mother and then her daughter about her leaving them. Both of them are very scared about her leaving. Her mother, from experience of already knowing what that pirating life did to her daughter, and her daughter from the prospect of knowing that her mother is, one, going to go do something dangerous, and two, there is something extra about Marjana that is shown in this chapter, where like you can tell that she is touched by magic and that it's somehow connected to her father, though we do not know who that is yet. Salima tells Amina to meet her in Aden, but first Amina's like, yo, I need to get my old crew together. So she goes and she finds her old poisoner named Delilah. She's an absolute delight. So funny, so curmudgeon, and not borderline, she's murderous, but in a fun way. And she goes to like her little broken down skinny shop, and Delilah threatens her a bit, and like they do this little am I gonna kill you, am I not gonna kill you, am I angry, am I not angry little game with each other. But it's really clear that Delilah has just missed Amina terribly, even though Amina can't tell that. Then they go to get Tinbu. He's a really good sailor. I don't know if he was the first mate, but he's a really good sailor. And so they go to Aden to go get Tinbu, because that's where he is. But when they show up to the docks, they hear a big commotion happening in the middle of the wharf, and they look over, and there is Amina's old ship, because she gave it to Tinbu to look after. There's her old ship sitting in the middle of the harbor, and there are 2 government armada ships surrounding it. And on the deck of her ship, she sees Tinbu being arrested. She watches him from a distance try to bribe his way out, and then he gets the shit smacked out of him, and then he gets carted off. All the while, there's this like old dude next to them, and he's like, please, please, like from the distance. Amina can tell he's like pleading on Tinbu's behalf. Next chapter, she's like, all right, we got to break Tinbu out, like, because they're about to murder him. They're like, you can't be pirating, we're gonna kill you. So they took him and his crew to the dungeons. So Amina and Delilah, they go and talk to the dude that was professing in Tinbu's defense, and he's a merchant, and he is basically on board when they come over and they're like, listen, we're trying to break him out. He's like, bet. Amina poses as like a what do you call it, a grifter, like a card gambler or whatever. I don't actually remember. I could read it, but it doesn't really matter. She poses as some shit. She gets arrested by the authorities. She has some hashish on her that she spikes. She has Delilah spike because she's a master of poisons with some sleeping whatever. Guards fall asleep. They go break out Tinbu. They take the ship. They're out of there. They have to sneak back onto the ship, and as they're trying to race it out of the harbor because there's a gate, one of the ships moves to intercept them. So she tells her crew, she's like, fuck it, if they won't let us out, just ram them. She climbs up to the crow's nest, lights some arrows on fire, and sets the warship on fire. And the warship is like, we are not going to survive if they ram us. So they move out of the way and they escape. They rescue Tinbu, but Aden was the city where she was supposed to be meeting up with Salima and like collecting the information. So the dude she's looking for, his name is Falco Palimenestra. And so she's like, I kind of fucked myself because I can't go back to that city. So after they escape, she has to figure out, what do I do now? talked to Tinbu, and apparently he had also been contacted by Falco. So Falco had, when Amina went and found Delilah, she found out that Falco had been looking for her, Delilah, as well. And he had looked for Delilah through a middleman named Laith. And this middleman, Laith, had also contacted Tinbu. And Amina's like, who is this dude, Falco, that keeps trying to get in contact with me? Like, this all started with an old lady telling her my grandma got captured by this dude, but it's seeming like this dude had been looking for her already and had been contacting her crewmates for some time. And so Tinbu's like, hey, let's go to this place. I forgot the name of it. It's in my book. Doesn't matter. And let's go to this place and meet up with Laith and find out like what's really happening. So they head to this place called Zabid to find Laith, and they meet him in this dingy ass tavern, and they're having this conversation with him, and the whole time he has like this minor cough, right? And they're asking him about information on Falco, and they're like plying him with money in order to get more and more information. He basically tells them that Falco had originally met with Salima to exchange relics, and she had sent him away when she found out that he was a Frank. But when she sent him away, her granddaughter Dunya actually wasn't kidnapped. She snuck after Falco and tried to strike her own deal. And she said that she would give Falco a relic called the Moon of Saba if he took her. And the Moon of Saba is like this hugely legendary, very obscure relic that I will reveal more about as the plot goes on, because that's kind of part of the plot. But Amina is aghast. She's like, holy shit, the Moon of Saba, like, where do they go? And Laith is like, I won't tell you unless you give me more money. And Amina's like, fuck it. Because he tells her it's on an island, just an island. She's like, what island? And he's like, I need that dough. And so she slides a bag of money to him, and as he's taking the money and he starts to tell her, his cough gets worse and worse. And then she looks at his neck, and it's fucking bulging with like these little indentations. And then he coughs up a fucking gold coin. Homie had choked on gold coins. The gold coins that when Amina checks the bag that she gave him was from her bag. He had choked on that shit. And they're like, let's get the fuck out of here. So Tinbu and Amina run away. Amina is like, Salima did not tell me everything that was going on. She said her granddaughter was kidnapped. That's no longer true. I think it's time I have another talk with her. They go to this place called Rubak, which is where Salima lives, I believe, and Amina goes solo to go meet with her, and she's basically like, you lied to me about the stakes of this. Salima is angry in her own right because Amina has raised her profile by launching a huge escape mission for Tinbu and lighting sails on fire and attacking the government. So she's like, your profile is way too high right now, and you still haven't found my granddaughter. And Amina's like, bitch, you told me your granddaughter was kidnapped. She ran away from you. And she's like, this is not what I signed up for. I didn't sign up to fight some dude that knows sorcery that can make a informant choke on a bag of coins. Like, this is not what I was doing. This was supposed to be like a quick search and rescue in the midst of me retiring. It wasn't supposed to be all this. And Salima is like, well, I'm rich. You're far from home. If you try to contact anyone, if you try to head home without finding my daughter, I will have people murder your family. Like, I have people stationed there. I set this up already. If you thought I was walking away from this negotiation table without my granddaughter's safety secured, you had another thing coming. And Amina is absolutely angry in this moment, but not nearly as angry as I was, because I was like, holy shit, This grandma is a piece of shit. And this actually is something that compounds as the plot goes on, but we'll talk about that later. But she's basically like, go find my daughter. And Amina's like, fuck, like, I don't really got a choice. I'm gonna just lock in, do what I gotta do for my daughter. And after this, I'm gonna deal with your ass. And so she leaves and she tells her crew, she's like, listen, we have to find out where this island is. I have a great sailor with me. I have a great poisoner with me. I'm a great leader, but we need that last member of our crew. We need, damn, what's his name? Majid? I think his name is Majid. Yes, it's Majid. But there's also a small little aside chapter that kind of explains what the Moon of Saba is, or at least it tells you one of the tales. We are told a couple different tales throughout the story because this book really is kind of like a love letter to myths and storytelling. And in that sense, it honors the reality of how much these legends change over time and how much they can splinter off into different versions. So the first version is the most romantic version that we get. And it tells the story of this great queen that lived way back when, named Queen Bilqis. And she was benevolent, she was kind, she was beautiful. And she is so amazing that she captured the attention of one of the aspects of the moon. I'll explain what that is right here. So cunning and beautiful that she captured the attention of the moon itself, or rather, an aspect. Perhaps I should clarify what I mean by an aspect. As you trace the movement of the stars and planets over the horizon, so too does the moon travel across them all, taking residence in a different location or manzil every fortnight. Practical people read such signs to cross oceans, devise horoscopes, and predict the weather. There are 18 named manzil, and we may forget all save the fourth, Aldebaran. So, Aldebaran is the figure of the moon that falls in love with this queen named Bilqis. And after capturing his attention in order to be with her, he turns himself into a pearl called the Moon of Saba. And then she wears him and enjoys his counsel for years to come. The aspect's name is Aldebaran. Aldebaran is an aspect of discord and strife and chaos. So the narrator acknowledges that it's a little confusing why his counsel was helpful to her at all, but it is how the story goes, and you know, myths tend to be a little weird. Next we see the crew sailing to Mogadishu to go get Majid, or Majed, maybe it's Majed, but Amina is super nervous about this meeting because Majed was like her older brother. He's also the navigator. That's why they're gonna go get him, is because they need him to find this island for them. He was the best navigator, best damn navigator out there. And so she is very nervous because he was very close to her, and she feels like the way that their crew fell apart was traumatic in a way where he would not want to see her. But his wife is the one that actually opens the door, but the wife is like, nah, like he's in the back though, because homie is dying to get out of here. They have like 2 or 3 beautiful children, and Amina's like a little heartbroken to be asking him to leave that life. But at the same time, Majed is also suffering from the urge to go out and see the world that Amina was suffering from, where it's like, I love my family, but I still feel that call of adventure. And so Majed is like, give me a couple days, let me see what I can do. And in a couple days, he actually does find the island, and he comes to her and he's like, yo, it's a pirate island called Socotra, and there is basically it's like a haven for pirates. And then on the cusp of it, there's like also a series of villages and stuff. but they have a symbiotic relationship with the pirates. And so Majed is like, listen, I can get us there because I'm a master navigator. I can get us to approach the island from this way, a way that they wouldn't expect, because most people can't sail over here because they ain't good as me, bitch. And so she's like, hey, listen, man, you got to stay with your family, your wife, like, stay here. And he's like, listen, where's your family? And Amina's like, whoa, man, I just told you my daughter's in danger. He's like, yeah, my bad. But no, seriously, let me come because your daughter is screwed if I don't come. And she's like, hey, bet. So they head off to go to Socotra to track down Dunya and Falco. It takes them about 10 days to actually get to the island. And once they get there, Amina takes Tinbu and Delilah onto the island. When they first arrive onto the shore, they see the old ship, the ship of what that they assume was Falco and Dunya's, and it is chewed the fuck up. It looks like someone took a giant ass bite out of it and it's torn to shreds. And they're like, yo, what the fuck happened over here? And because there's also the reason why they know it's a bite, there's a huge fucking tooth in it, and they're like, oh my god. But they're like, yo, in for a penny, in for a pound. I don't know if that's a saying or not. They head deeper into the island and they make camp the first night. And as they're leaving their campsite, Amina looks up at a hill that was overlooking their campsite, and there's a imprint of a footprint there. And the thing is, these are hardened pirates. They sleep in shifts and they look at all their lookout points. No one had seen who was there. So they're like, what the fuck is going on? They're creeping through these woods. They don't see any signs of people, really many signs of nature. It's dead silent. They're like, what the fuck? Eventually, later in that day, they walk out and they see a village burnt to a fucking crisp. As they explore it, they find out it's a Christian village, and in front of the church, in the middle of like the courtyard area of the village, there is a huge tree. And impaled upon these trees are 3 priests with spears through them and into the tree, keeping them stuck into the tree. And everyone is horrified. On the necks of all of these elders are also 3 puncture marks. And they're like, what does this mean? But Delilah's like, before we do anything, we need to bury these people before we move on. And so they do so. And as they're leaving, Amina hears something in the bushes and she throws her dagger, but when she goes to check, she does not find her dagger. She just finds a nest with 3 cracked open eggs, and she's just like, bro, this is a bad omen. And as they continue down walking, at some point Amina just hears something, so she pulls Tinbu out of the way, and in the space where he had just been, a dagger flies through the space. And when she looks to see where it came from, she sees Raksh, her 4th ex-husband, and the most recent one as well. From there, we get a flashback to way back when Amina had first met Raksh, which was a late night in the Maldives after her and her crew had finished a job. They were all like letting loose on the island, and Amina had just said goodbye to her 3rd ex-husband. Friendly parting. They just went to go live different lives. So she was feeling real down in her dumps, and she runs into Raksh, and he starts, talking to her and flirting with her, and she's flirting back, and they're just feeling the vibes, and they get married, and it's a contract, but like Amina doesn't realize that she's making a demon contract. She thinks she's just making a marriage contract. Because she's a Muslim, she refuses to have sex with people unless she is married to them, which is also why she has 4 husbands so far. And so she's like, hey man, like if we gonna do this, you gonna be my husband. And he's like, a husband? Is that a contract? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, hey, I've been looking to do a contract to get off this island. For some reason, he was trapped on the island. And so he's like, I needed a contract to get off this island. you want to bone me, let's get married. Like, he didn't really have a concept of what marriage was. And they have great sex all night, and then the next morning Amina wakes up, and this whole time Raksh was in a very human looking form. In the morning he's in his demon form, so full blue body, scale, horns, like the whole nine. And she's like, what the fuck did I just do? So we then come back to the present after learning how they met, and Raksh and Amina start fighting immediately, and I mean physically. Like, Amina swings a sword at him, even though that wasn't gonna do shit, and he just wins because he's a demon, and he starts questioning her. Apparently, we learned that she had locked him in a chest and then dropped him to the bottom of the ocean, which I think we had learned in little bits and pieces prior to now, but she did it because he made another bargain with a different member of her crew named Asif, who was like, Amina was like a big homie to Asif. She felt very responsible for his death. And Asif is the father of Dunya. That was the other thing that kind of got Amina to take the job, and part of the reason why Salima knew who she was. And so Asif died after making a deal with Raksh. After one of the stipulations for bringing him aboard, Amina told him not to make any deals with, or not to mess with any of her other crewmates. And they're fighting about this, and then it turns out that Falco found Raksh, and Raksh is a demon of desires and wants, and so he feeds off of people's desires. And so here's this man full of ambition. So Raksh attaches himself to him, and that's how we also know that Falco has learned so much about Amina, is because Raksh has been supplying him with all this information. We also learn that there is still some sort of bond between, like magical bond between between Amina and Raksh, because he has never felt more alive than when they have been reunited in this moment. He's getting fed by her desires again, which no other person has been able to give him even an inkling of what her desires feed him. And so he's like, it must be this marriage contract. And in Amina's mind, she's like, holy shit, it might be my daughter, Marjana, because Raksh doesn't know that Marjana exists, and Amina wants to keep it that way because Raksh is a demon, and she doesn't even know how gods or demons react to their siblings and stuff. And so she's like, just to keep her safe, especially with this chaotic ass ex-demon of mine, he can't know about her. And so she's like, if you want to break our marriage contract, then you have to do what I say. Because Raksh's whole thing is like, the whole reason that I'm not able to get energy from other places is because we never absolved this marriage contract. So after we end this marriage, then we can go, then I'll be able to go feed off of other desires like I want to. And Amina's whole thing is like, Raksh doesn't understand how marriage works. And so she is like, I'm going to use him as my way of getting to Dunya because he was part of Falco's crew. Apparently, the reason why Raksh is in the jungle is because he ran away because Falco is fucking crazy. And he was slowly learning that the thing that destroyed Falco's ship was a merid, which is like the most rare and most powerful form of a jinn. I think that's how you pronounce it, Djinn. But they are these ancient powerful beings, and apparently Falco summoned one at sea. He was like, any of my crew that don't pledge themselves to me now, you getting fed to the beast. And they got fed to the beast. The creature is like this huge sea scorpion thingy, and Falco made his crew of mercenaries drink this sludge that made them a part of the marriage. So they start turning into like these grotesque ass crustacean ass creatures, like half creatures, chimerics type shit. And everyone that refused to swallow the sludge and be a part of this got murked. And so Falco now has like a crew of super crustacean men that he used to burn down and fuck up that village that we saw and murder those elders. They didn't find any other bodies, and that's because they had taken all the other villagers as captives. And so Dunya is like, how did you get away? And Raksh is like, I slipped through the back tunnels, because the whole reason we're on this island of Socotra, it's classic pirate adventure. There's a cave of wonders type shit, but it is deep and there are so many different ends, so you could just get lost endlessly in it. And so Raksh, being a demon, he just pieced out on the deep side of the cave and eventually crawled his way out. And so he's like, I can let you back in. Once we're out of there, you got to teach me how to break this marriage contract. And so that's the deal. And so they head over. Raksh takes them through the backside of the tunnel, and they're crawling through this like small area, but then it opens up into this truly massive interior. It's like an open mountain inside, essentially. It's absolutely enormous. And they continue going down tunnels. They see murals and codes and all this wondrous shit. They see a giant, absolutely massive white snake skin abandoned. And Amina's like, what kind of snake left something like this? Like, it's literally the size of like a city bus. And so they continue on, and then at some point, Amina sees like a little staircase off to the side and hears like some whispering, and she starts heading towards it, and she sees this door, this massive like brass door with all these carvings, and she just feels compelled and pulled towards it. And as she's about to go touch it, Raksh is suddenly there, and he grabs her and he's like, don't touch that and forget you ever saw it. And he leads her back. That'll be important later. And so they head down, and finally they enter the catacombs, which is closer to the cave entrance where Falco and his men and everything is, and hopefully then Dunya. And as they're searching for Dunya, they enter into this room, and it is a nightmare. Falco had taken a great number of the villagers, sacrificed them in a super bloody ritual. So there's just blood languishing the floor along with body parts and shit. And in the corner are the rest of the surviving villagers just cowering. So they were there, they watched the whole thing, and then they just had to sit there with the bodies afterwards. Fucked up. In the midst of all this, they don't see Dunya anywhere. But Amina's like, hey, like, we can't just leave them here. So she tells her crew, she's like, hey, lead them back out the way that we came with Raksh. And so they're all trying to sneak out, and suddenly they hear the mercenaries start making sounds, and they're like, holy shit, the prisoners aren't here, whatever. And so Amina's like, oh, we're not gonna get away. So she tells them, she's like, you guys go ahead, I'm going back. And they're like, ain't no way. And she's like, hey, I'm your Naduka. You listen to me. And so she sends Raksh. She's like, hey, make sure they make it out. And she turns around and she faces the mercenaries, and they're like, who the fuck are you? And she's like, I'm Amina al Sarafi, bitch. After that, we get a quick flashback to the night of the Maldives, like right after she woke up and found him as a demon. And it's basically showing them like fighting for a while, and then having a conversation about Amina and her desires, and Raksh really telling her like, I can make you a legend, and that is my goal. Like, I'm gonna make something that bards will sing of for generations to come. And Amina really feels that desire spark within her, and personally it woke up memories of the pomegranate scene from Familiar. So I was just like, oh, this is cool. Headed into the next chapter though, The two mercenaries drag Amina to go meet Falco, and she meets Homie, and she's like, this dude is crazy. He is very charismatic. She is shocked by how mundane his appearance is. He's just so basic, but that kind of like touches on like that banality of evil point where like people expect evil to look crazy and shit, but it looks like Elon Musk or some shit, you know? And he is not a man that is accustomed to hearing no, as powerful men often are not. So when she tells him that she's not going to help him, which initially he had been looking for her, you know, because she was this legendary pirate, he wanted her on his crew, but now he's like, Dunya ran away. I forgot to mention that. So he's like, she's not here, and I need your help. I need your help to track her down. And she's like, fuck you. And so he has his guards demonstrate how powerful they are, and she's like, I don't care, even though inside she's shaking in her boots. And he's like, how about this then? And he has his guards hold her down, and there's like this little pot of bubbling gunk that is cooking, and he gets like a little cup of the sludge, and he pours that shit down her throat, and it's fucking acrid and nasty, and it takes over her, and she fucking passes out. When she wakes up, she's on the beach, and she is slowly being dragged towards the ocean, where a horde of scorpions are crawling out of the sea. There are crew members that are digging a huge pit, and the scorpions are filling up this pit, and they're getting ready to throw Amina inside of this scorpion pit. Assumedly, this is how all of these mercenaries got their powers. And Amina is fucking terrified. She's like screaming, resisting and shit. And like in my brain, I'm like, bro, this is such scary imagery, you know, like a pit of scorpions from a ocean married while you're surrounded by crustacean men. It's very H.P. Lovecraft. And as she is about to be pulled in, there's suddenly a large a fire arrow that gets shot out, and her crew busts out of the bushes, and they fight and they rescue her. Raksh pulls open her chest kind of and pulls out the merit stinger, which was the thing that apparently Falco had made her swallow and was the first part of her transformation. Raksh pulls that shit out of her chest, and they all book it. Back to the other side of the island, they build a signer fire, and they wait for the ship to come back, which Majed comes back. He's super unhappy to see that Raksh is there, but they're like, hey, Raksh knows where Dunya is. Raksh could sense her, and so he was like, I can tell you what direction she went. And so they bring him on board. It takes them 2 days to find her. She had taken, so when Falco's ship got destroyed, they had, the only ship that survived was essentially the escape raft, was just a small boat called a Dungy. And so that's what she had escaped on, which is why Falco couldn't have followed her when she escaped. And so they find Dunya dying and dehydrated in this Dungy, clutching these old tablets and shit that she had run away with from her grandmother. They bring Dunya onto the ship, and then they start to talk to her and ask her, like, hey, like, how'd you get into this situation? What's up? We learned that Dunya was fated to marry the governor of Aden, that town that Amina blew up that ship in and rescued Timbu from. And so Amina's like, oh, that's why the grandma was so mad, because she was trying to come up with a political marriage for her granddaughter during that time. And apparently Dunya has been trying to get out of this marriage because Dunya is trans. And so Dunya is like, I can't see myself in that type of life. Dunya dresses in very masculine wardrobe and everything, And when they're having this conversation, Amina looks at her and she's like, do you feel more as yourself like this? And that was kind of like the way that she was kind of like getting Dunya to start trying to talk about that side of herself. The other reason she ran away is because Dunya is fucking smart. She has taken all of these tablets and scriptures and all these things from her grandma's collection or whatever, her family's collection, and she translated all this shit. The reason why Falco took her to go find the Moon of Saba is because she's the one that actually knows how to translate all the transcripts. She's the one that did all of the academic deep work, and so she is very passionate about like exploring and scholarship and learning about the magical world and protecting it from people like Falco that would try to manipulate it and acquire its power. And so Amina's like, well, you know, Falco's back there. Can he get the Moon of Saba without you? And Dunya is like, no, he can't get the Moon of Saba without me. And then she explains what the Moon of Saba is, which is actually a wash basin. Like, it's not a pearl, it's a wash basin. And this is where the book tells the second story of the Moon of Saba, because Aldebaran was a creep, which isn't surprising. He was a god of chaos and mischief and strife. And so apparently Queen Bilqis was washing in her bathroom, and he was trying to spy on her. And so he hopped into her wash basin and got trapped in there. And then afterwards, she just used him as like a divining tool afterwards. So what the Moon of Saba actually does, it gives humans sight into the magical world. Amina is just like, damn, like, that's crazy. And and so Amina learns all of this about the Moon of Saba, and she leaves Dunya to rest in the captain quarters, and she goes to talk to Majed, or Majed walks up to talk to her, and he finds out about Dunya's gender identity, and he asks Amina, he's like, are you going to send her back? And Amina's like, do I have a choice? Like, I need my daughter back. And he's like, are you just gonna, like, I know you ran away from your family because they restricted your wings. Could you do that to her? And while Amina is like grappling with this, because she feels so much guilt and responsibility over others, this is tied back to Asif and all that. And so while she's grappling with this, one of her crewmates up in the crow's nest calls that he sees something up on the horizon, but he can't describe what it is. And so Amina tells Asif to go up there, and Asif goes up there and he's like, hey yo, this, I don't know what this is. Raksh comes over and he lets them know that it was Falco and his Merid that was coming for them, and it was coming towards them super quickly. It essentially looked like a storm that was growing closer and closer every second. It is just blotting out the horizon so quickly, and a monsoon is coming with it. Raksh, as they're running away, it becomes clear that they cannot get away. Raksh starts to tell Amina to just dump Dunya in the ocean and be like, give her to Falco so we could live. And Amina's like, fuck you, man, you are such a coward. And Raksh's reply to that was to steal the Dungy. And so no one's getting away. And Falco approaches on this huge ass, like, if you look at the cover of the book, this is the scene that is being depicted right now. And this is maybe, I think it's the coolest sea battle scene that I've ever read. Falco comes on aboard the ship. The Merid's tentacles are surrounding the ship, breaking it. People are dying everywhere. Falco actually comes aboard the ship. Falco and Amina start having a sword fight, to which Amina is losing. And in the middle of this losing battle, Dunya comes out onto the ship deck, and she smashes the tablets onto the deck, meaning all of the maps, all of the knowledge just got destroyed. And she's like, Falco, if you want to get the Moon of Saba, let the crew go, and I will go and lead you there. And he's like, fucking bet. And so all the crew surrenders, Dunya goes over, and then he has Amina brought to him by his crew, to which he takes her khanjar, which is like a little hook dagger that's from her grandfather, who was also a pirate. She comes from a line of pirates. And he fucking smacks her in the head with it, stabs her, tries to stab her in the heart, but she turns her body, so he stabs her shoulder, and then he throws her overboard. Amina's unconscious body somehow gets hooked on a piece of driftwood, and then she manages to get her body over to an island that she finds. And it's a super duper weird, bizarre island, and she starts exploring through it, and she comes across this tree that has water inside of its leaves, and she is absolutely dehydrated, and she was like, I really needed water, and it appeared in that moment. And she was like, thank God, and she drinks deeply of the water. And then as she's moving through the forest, she's running into a bunch of weird ass sights. She just running through the forest, seeing scary sight after scary sight, and then she actually runs into Raksh. She's like, you bitch. And she runs over and she starts punching him. And halfway through punching him, she realizes that he's bleeding. And she's like, holy shit, I can actually hurt him now. And she doesn't know why, but she leans in and beats his ass, yo. It felt so good to finally have this dude get his ass beat. After she finally stops beating his ass, because I mean, he's a demon, so he was just like, well, got my ass beat. And then he tells her the third and final and true tale of the Moon of Saba, about how it's an artifact that would give its wielder power over all the aspects of strife, of chaos, of all that stuff. And Raksh, being a demon of strife and chaos and all that, he would be enslaved to Falco, should Falco achieve the Moon of Saba. So Amina learns that Raksh actually has huge buy-in to stop Falco from achieving his goals. And Amina is even more terrified because she's like, if Raksh could be controlled, would that extend to Marjana as his daughter? So they both have very strong incentives to get back. And so Amina's like, how do we get out of here? And Raksh is like, ain't no getting out of here. And he's like, the owners of this island don't even want you to be here because you aren't supposed to be here. And she's like, what does that mean? And apparently the island is ruled by these magical beings called Peris. And they basically are in charge of keeping the magical world separated from the human world. And Amina being a human, they would most likely kill her or try to keep her on the island rather than letting her escape, because she shouldn't have reached the magical world, so she damn sure can't go back. But with the amount of wrath and ruin that Falco could unleash on the world, I mean, it's like, Raksh, prepare me for an audience with them, because I doubt that they want the power of the Moon of Saba released onto the world, so I have to at least try to petition them. And so he gets her all done up. He gives her like a coat of diamond porcupine quills and shit. Like, she is done up. They go into the forest and they get whisked up by this whirlwind up into this magical sky palace where the Peris exist, which are like harpies. Basically, they're like harpy people, half insect and human, half bird and human, but they're half people and all magical. And they go up and they are talking to this council of Peris, and Amina's trying to convince them to let her go, and they're like, nah girl, not only can we not let you go, but since you drank from that tree, they didn't know she drank from the tree, but they're like, you're magical now. And she's like, it must be because I drank from that tree, which is why she could also beat Raksh's ass when she found him. But they're like, you can never ever see your daughter again. She never mentioned her daughter, but they're like, you can't go back to the human world. And she's like, that cannot be. And she's like, what about all the chaos that Falco will bring on the world? And the Perrys are like, well, I mean, it's not like the first time that someone has gotten the moon of Saba. A couple thousand, hundreds of thousand deaths may result, but ultimately that's something that we can live with. And Amina's like, damn, are you for real? And they're like, yeah. And they open up the floor and she plummets for the ground. Because like I said, this is a sky palace. And as she's about to crash into the ground, she gets rescued by a different Perry. This Perry's name is Kaiser. And Kaiser is seen as like a radical amongst his people. And so he takes Amina back up and stands beside her to help her petition, and he says that he will drop Amina off because he's already headed that way. And the reason why he says it this way is because the Perrys are supposed to be prevented from directly influencing the human world, but he's like, I'm on that way, so it don't really matter like that. You know, they're trying to find like magical loopholes. The Perrys are like, fine, you win, but we're gonna say that you broke the rules. We don't know what that means yet, but it seems like it's something that will affect Kaiser going on in the series. But they're like, Amina, we'll let you go back into the world as long as you bring us 5 transgressions. And transgressions are the things that are of the magical world that have crossed over into the human world, like the moon of Saba. And they're like, if you can stop Falco from using the moon of Saba and bring it back to us, and then collect 4 more, we'll release you of your servitude and you can go back and living your human life. But that is the only way you're making it off this island. And she's like, bet. The one that actually proposes this deal is Raksh, because he is determined to make her a legend. But this is how the deal ends up. Kaiser flies Amina and Raksh over to Socotra, but he drops them off on the pirate side of the island, so Amina can petition the pirates in order to try and get a crew to go and rescue her crew and Dunya and everyone else. Most of the pirates are not fucking with her, but there is a boisterous, brash, but also very experienced young pirate named Magnon, and he accepts, and he takes her onto his ship. And so they launch a 2-pronged attack with Magnon and his crew approaching from the sea in order to attract the attention of the Merid. And Amina approaches with a second crew on the other side, on the beach side, to free all her crew while they engage with the ship. And Magnon also had given, in the preparation for this battle, had given Amina a magical dagger, and with her new powers, she's able to see the Merid stingers that are sticking out of these magical soldiers, and so she's running around being able to magically sever their ties to the Merid, and basically just making the battle much, much easier. She rescues her crew, and then she runs into the tunnel to go stop Falco. She runs into the cave system, goes all the way to the brass door that she avoided before, because by now she's realized, like, oh, this must have been the magical cave where the moon of Saba is awakened at. She goes through the door, and instead of entering into a room, she enters a room of her own mind, because she enters a flashback. This is the moment that we learn that the deal that Raksh had made with Asif had made it so Asif had lost his soul. So he essentially became a zombie, and he went on a absolute tear that night, eating person after person after person, until Amina finally killed him by burning him alive, which is kind of a good explanation for why this was such a traumatic moment for all of them, why it broke up the crew, why it resulted in her locking Raksh in a chest under the sea. Like, that is fucking brutal. And so she's stuck in this nightmare, and she eventually is able to break out of it. She follows further into the tunnel until she gets to this weird garden where she sees Dunya is blindfolded, holding a block of salt, saying an incantation and levitating while she carves some words out, clearly performing the ritual for Falco, who is standing next to her. And Falco is like, you can't interrupt her or else we're all dead here, because this is like a supernatural middle space and magic is in play. And so Amina starts sword fighting Falco, and she starts winning. But before she wins, Dunya cries out and falls to the floor. And Amina immediately runs over to go check on her. And in that time, Falco immediately picks up the Moon of Saba and looks at it, even though Amina tries to like throw a shoe or some shit to stop her. But it's like, bro, you should have immediately gone for the moon. But joke's on him, because Dunya, genius that she is, actually reversed the incantation. So instead of allowing him sight into the world, it allowed Aldebaran to possess Falco. Aldebaran is in the real world, defeating Falco's plan. But now here's the bigger issue of this fucking chaos god that's now here. Amina tries to talk him down, and he immediately attacks her. And so she starts hiding with Dunya, and Dunya is like, I think I could maybe reverse the incantation and send him back. You just need to buy me time. And so Amina starts tussling, not really fighting, but, surviving attacks by Aldebaran, dancing around and stuff. And earlier when she was fighting all the people outside, she actually defeated the Merid. She climbed up all the way to its crown, and she severed, with her magical dagger, its tie to Falco. And so when she did that, the Merid was like, yo, you got a friend in me. Not really, because they don't have friends, but they're like, you can call on me if you need me. And so while she's fighting Aldebaran, he summons the large white snake that we had seen the skin of earlier when they were crawling through the tunnels, and it slams Amina into the wall, and she's like, yo, my ass is grass. And so she calls upon the Merid to try and summon her favor. The Merid cracks open the ceiling of the cave, allowing the moon to shine through, and she throws the Moon of Saba at his feet. And seeing his opportunity, he uses the staff to crack the Moon and Saba in half, freeing him and sending his chaotic, messy, dirty ass back to the moon. And then, of course, Amina gotta walk up to Falco's unpossessed body and just make sure he's dead as fuck, because fuck that dude. And then, yeah, they bounce. Sailing away, Raksh tells Amina that he's gonna make a legend out of her, that he has never lived the way he has lived when he was with her, and now that he's back with her, like, the adventures, like, they are unstoppable. And she's like, you might be a little right. And they still have this attraction, so they have sex. And then she throws him overboard and sends him away again. She goes back home. She tells her daughter about her life a little bit. She tells her about how she used to be a pirate and everything, and she actually brings her daughter onto the ship. And she brings Dunya along, who Dunya's name is now Jamal. Yes, it is the person that was telling us the tale the whole time. And so with that, it kind of wrapped up the whole tale, and just great adventure, man. So much love that shines through in this book for storytelling. Such a beautiful tale that is from a character that is a veteran and so approaches the tale with way more wisdom than someone headed out on their first journey, where for this was more of a dressel of past and the attempt to make a world that her daughter can inherit. You know, the characters were so heartfelt, the adventure never stopped, the mythology, the way it treats myth and mythology is so detailed. I just love this book so much, and so I think I'm gonna leave it there. But yeah, I'll bid adieu now because I've been here forever.